still remember the humidity pressing against my skin that fateful night, the moonlight filtering through the thick canopy of the South American jungle, and the muffled sound of my own breathing through the balaclava. I was part of an elite Black Ops unit, tasked with missions that never made the news and wouldn't be acknowledged by any government agency if things went wrong. But everything about this particular assignment felt different. There was a tension in the air, an undercurrent of dread that I couldn't shake, and a nagging sense that I was being watched. Yet I told myself to focus, to trust the mission briefing, to trust the men who had sent me here. Little did I know I was walking straight into a betrayal that would nearly cost me my life, and end up costing my betrayers far more than they could have possibly imagined. I was codenamed Spectre back then, a moniker earned through countless covert operations that required me to strike unseen, gather intel, and vanish into thin air before anyone realized they'd been compromised. The night was thick with tension as my partner, Ramirez, and I crept through the sweltering undergrowth. We had intel that a high-value target was meeting local insurgents to broker a deal involving stolen nuclear material, but there was no official record of this, of course. If caught, we were told the US government would disavow any knowledge of our existence, which was par for the course in Black Ops. We'd trained for this. We knew the risks and we accepted them, but we never expected the real danger to come from our own side. The extraction point was half a mile north, and we had to secure proof that the corrupt official was indeed trading with known terrorists. So we slipped past armed guards, disabling motion sensors, sidestepping half-buried tripwires. The entire operation was supposed to be hush-hush, orchestrated directly by a high-ranking official in the Pentagon, known to us only by his code name, Atlas. I'd always found that name a bit too grand, too mythic, for a man who stayed hidden in an office. But I had no clue at that time of the monstrous secrets he kept, nor how cruelly he'd turn on his own operatives the moment it became convenient. As we reached a remote clearing where a small metal hut stood beneath the moonlight, our objective seemed simple enough. Gather video evidence of the deal, transmit it via secure satellite link, and then exfiltrate without leaving a trace. We'd done this sort of thing a dozen times before, but something felt off. The perimeter was dotted with too many men for a secret meeting. The entire area felt like a fortress. These were not merely local insurgents. They moved like professionals, their eyes scanning the tree-line in disciplined patterns, their rifles cradled in steady hands. Still, I'd been taught that fear was just another piece of intel, something to be noted, processed, and used. So I kept my cool, signaled Ramirez to stay sharp, and we pressed forward through the dense vegetation. Minutes later, we were perched behind some debris, vantage point perfect for capturing video of the exchange. Sure enough, an American official in a crisp suit stepped out of an armored SUV, greeted by two shady men in camouflage. One man carried a battered metal suitcase, presumably containing either cash or precious nuclear materials. My camera was already rolling, capturing every incriminating frame. Ramirez, next to me, whispered coordinates into his headset, ensuring the satellite link was ready for a live feed. But as he pressed the button to transmit, all we got was static. Strange. Our gear was the best money could buy, tested thoroughly before the mission. There was no logical reason for the signal to fail unless, without warning, a bullet whizzed past my ear, embedding itself into the tree trunk behind me with a dull thud. The hush of the jungle shattered. Our position was compromised, and an entire squad of mercenaries was suddenly converging on us. That moment, adrenaline surged through my veins, and I went into survival mode, returning fire with controlled bursts. Ramirez did the same, cursing under his breath as he scrambled to reset the sat link. Another bullet grazed my arm, searing pain lancing through me, but I forced it aside. We had to get out or we'd be overrun. Falling back, we dashed through the tangle of vines and moss-covered trunks, rifles at the ready. The thick foliage offered partial cover, but we were outnumbered and outgunned. Our retreat grew frantic, with sporadic bursts of gunfire echoing across the jungle. On the run, I tried calling for extraction, my voice hushed but urgent over the comms. There was only silence. Repeated attempts to raise our headquarters yielded nothing but dead air. The possibility that something had gone catastrophically wrong began to dawn on me. We needed to retreat further, deeper into the undergrowth, and find another way out. In a desperate bid, we circled around, relying on old-fashioned land navigation skills to locate a fallback route. Each step was a potential death trap, the shadows sometimes morphing into armed silhouettes. After an hour of cat and mouse, a bullet took Ramirez in the leg, making him stagger. I covered him, suppressing fire with short bursts that forced our pursuers to take cover. Blood streamed down his pant leg, and I fought the rising panic as I realized we were cut off. Our path to the extraction point had been sealed, and we had minimal supplies. Even then, the thought that the Pentagon had actually betrayed us never crossed my mind. It seemed unthinkable. We managed to improvise a hiding spot inside a small cave near a waterfall, the roar of crashing water masking any sound we made. Ramirez's breathing was ragged, and he pressed a tattered field dressing to his wound. I took stock of our gear. 3 magazines left for my rifle, 2 for his, 1 medical kit, and a single canteen of water.
No rations.
We were in trouble, but we still had the video footage on a secure drive. If we could just get out, we could blow the lid on this entire operation. We had to survive. That's the thought that kept me going, even as the ache in my wounded arm grew. At dawn, the mercenaries were still sweeping the area. Somehow, we slipped past them, half crawling, half running through mud and thorns. When we reached the remote landing zone, the helicopter never arrived. The sun rose higher, and we hid beneath thick brush, hearts pounding, waiting. We tried every frequency we knew, even the emergency channels. No response. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a glitch or a mission gone bad. This was a setup. They wanted us dead, and they didn't care how it happened. In the distance, we could hear the chop of rotor blades, but it never came our way. We were alone. Ramirez's condition worsened. Feverish and delirious from blood loss, he muttered about betrayal, about how he had overheard a conversation in the forward operating base a week earlier, something about our mission being a one-way ticket. I tried to brush it off as delirium, but in my heart, a cold dread settled. If the Pentagon, or at least certain people within it, had orchestrated our downfall, then we were on our own. The idea shook me to my core. I had always believed in serving my country, trusting the chain of command, but it seemed the chain of command had decided I was expendable. Desperate, I carried Ramirez as best I could, stumbling through thick vegetation until we reached a clearing large enough for a makeshift signal. With trembling hands, I rigged a distress beacon. Hours passed, each second feeling like an eternity. I prayed that some distant ally or friendly recon plane would pick up the beacon, but there was nothing. Finally, 2 choppers roared overhead. My hope soared, only to be crushed as they opened fire. Bullets tore through the trees, forcing me to dive for cover. Ramirez screamed, his body convulsing, and then he went still. I crawled to him, ignoring my own injuries, only to find that his eyes stared blankly at the canopy overhead, his last breath rattling in his throat. Enraged and consumed by despair, I grabbed my rifle and fired at the helicopters. A futile gesture, but I needed to fight back. The jungle erupted in chaos once more, leaves shredded by gunfire, the ground erupting with dirt and shrapnel. I realized there was no saving Ramirez now. I had to move. Rolling behind a fallen log, I found a moment to slip away. Heart hammering, grief and fury propelled me forward. I refused to die here. If I made it back, I would expose whoever had done this, no matter how powerful they were. What followed was 2 weeks of sheer survival. Driven by vengeance and the need to uncover the truth, I rationed water from streams, ate whatever I could find. Bugs, roots, the occasional snake. Every step was agony, my wounds throbbing, infection setting in, but I pressed on. Mercenaries scoured the area, likely with aerial support, so I stuck to the densest parts of the rainforest, employing every piece of survival training I'd been taught. Several times I nearly died, from snake bites, from infected cuts, from dehydration, but hatred for my betrayers kept me alive. Somehow I made it to a remote village. The locals, who spoke a dialect I barely understood, took pity on me. They gave me food and let me rest for a few days, helping me treat my wounds. While recuperating, I discovered an old satellite phone in a dilapidated supply shed, likely left by some passing missionary or field researcher. My heart pounded as I powered it up, expecting it not to work. Miraculously, it did. But contacting my usual channels was pointless. If the chain of command had been compromised, I might alert the very people trying to kill me. Instead, I used a clandestine frequency to reach an old friend, a CIA analyst I trusted named Drake. I told him only a fraction of what had happened, just enough to secure an emergency exfiltration. Drake, shocked at my condition, quietly arranged a small plane to land on a rural airstrip at night. If all went well, I'd finally be out of this hell. That extraction was a nerve-wracking affair, involving bribes to local militia and skillful timing. But it worked, and soon I found myself in a rickety plane, the roar of its engines promising salvation. My mind spun with questions as we soared above the jungle. Who had betrayed us? Who stood to benefit from orchestrating our deaths? And why had they gone to such lengths, risking exposure of illegal deals with terrorists? I suspected a deep conspiracy rooted in the highest echelons of power, but I had no proof beyond that video footage on the secure drive, which was now tucked into my belt. I clutched it like a lifeline, determined to find answers and avenge Ramirez. Drake met me in a safe house, a cramped apartment in a nameless city, well off the radar of any official intelligence operation. He was pale when he saw my condition, and he wasted no time helping me get medical treatment. Over the next month, I pieced together my shattered body, muscle by muscle, regaining some semblance of strength. Despite my injuries, I refused to rest mentally. My mind churned, replaying the betrayal over and over, trying to recall every detail of the mission briefing, every suspicious glint in an officer's eye, every rumor I'd ever heard about Atlas back in the Pentagon. Slowly, I uncovered a web of deceit. Atlas wasn't just any official. He was a high-ranking Pentagon operative with ties to private defense contractors and secret deals that spanned multiple conflict zones. Using Drake's hacking expertise, we found references to black funds funneling into foreign accounts, shell companies used to launder money from illegal arms deals. Everything pointed to a carefully orchestrated scheme, with Atlas at the center, reaping massive profits from selling advanced weaponry and sensitive nuclear materials under the table. It explained the presence of mercenaries, the overly fortified meeting location, and the willingness to kill loyal operatives like me to keep it all under wraps. I felt a cold, trembling rage. Everything I had believed in, the ideals of serving my country, the honor of the uniform, had been tarnished by a few power-hungry monsters. My loyalty had been exploited, and Ramirez had paid with his life. I vowed I'd see Atlas face justice, but I knew the system was broken. If I simply turned over my evidence to the authorities, there was a high chance they would bury it, or bury me along with it. No, I needed to handle this differently. I needed to be smart, methodical, and ruthless, just as I had been in Black Ops. For months, Drake and I worked in the shadows. We built an arsenal of data, financial records, incriminating emails, even phone transcripts that tied Atlas and his associates to conspiracy after conspiracy. It was a dangerous game, requiring us to hack into government servers, sometimes physically infiltrating offices that should have been off-limits. I relied on my Black Ops training to slip into restricted locations late at night, clone hard drives, photograph confidential documents, and slip away unnoticed. Each mission had my heart pounding, but my resolve never wavered. The deeper we dug, the more horrifying the truths we uncovered. Funding extremist groups to destabilize regions, assassinations covered up as accidents, and deals with rogue nations that put millions of innocent lives at risk. Drake, though not a field operative, risked his life handling the cyber side of things. We changed safe houses regularly to avoid detection. In dark corners of cheap motels, we pored over reams of secret files, often dropping them onto encrypted drives and moving them through multiple proxy servers. Every so often, we received a whisper from someone inside the government, an ally of justice who caught wind of our operation and wanted to help. Yet we had to be cautious. There were plenty of traitors who might pretend to be allies just to lure us out. Meanwhile, Atlas grew bolder. News of unexplained drone strikes, suspicious military shipments, and backroom deals reached us through the grapevine. The body count of whistleblowers and potential threats to his operation climbed, each death reported as an unfortunate accident or a terrorist attack. At night, I lay awake, my mind replaying the mission where Ramirez died, my anger burning like a branding iron. Guilt coiled in my gut, too. I had recruited Ramirez for that mission, praising the importance of our duty. Now he was gone, and I couldn't rest until I'd avenged him. Finally, the day arrived when our dossier on Atlas and his cohorts was thorough enough to shake the foundations of the Pentagon. But simply leaking it wouldn't be enough. Powerful people had a way of spinning narratives, burying truths, or labeling whistleblowers as traitors. I needed something more. A dramatic reveal that would draw widespread attention, ensuring the story couldn't be quietly buried. And so, I decided to stage a public operation, using all my skills in espionage and psychological warfare. First, we contacted a group of respected journalists known for their fearless reporting, ensuring they would run the story if we provided irrefutable proof. Then, we set in motion a plan to expose Atlas in a very personal way, one that would draw maximum scrutiny. It involved an untraceable infiltration of a high-security Pentagon event, the same place where Atlas and other officials would gather to discuss national security initiatives. The irony was rich. I would use their own obsession with security against them. On the day of the event, I took up a vantage point in a tall building across from the massive concrete structure. Drake, tucked away in a van several blocks down the street, manned the digital side of our assault. Through a carefully orchestrated digital infiltration, we hijacked the building's internal video feeds. We had the entire event at our fingertips, able to broadcast any file, any footage, to the massive screens they used for presentations. Meanwhile, journalists waited on standby, ready to amplify the story the moment it broke. The event began as expected, with top brass congratulating each other on the stability they were bringing to conflict zones. My teeth ground in disgust. Then it was Atlas's turn to speak. He took the podium, a man in his early 50s with a stiff posture and a practiced smile. Cameras flashed, and the audience of military personnel and political figures sat in respectful silence. I let him talk for a few minutes, spouting his usual rhetoric about patriotism, the need to protect American interests, and the sacrifices made by the brave men and women in uniform. My blood boiled. This man had sacrificed us, not for any noble cause, but for greed. The moment arrived. Drake triggered the infiltration, and the massive screens behind Atlas flickered. He paused, confused, as the official seal of the Department of Defense vanished, replaced by clandestine footage of the South American jungle meeting. The same footage Ramirez and I had captured showed the American official exchanging pleasantries with armed terrorists, discussing shipments and payments. Then came screenshots of Atlas's emails, transcripts of phone calls, bank statements. Murmurs filled the auditorium, confusion and outrage mounting. Atlas's face turned ashen. He tried to spin around to order the tech team to shut it down, but it was too late. I zoomed in my rifle scope from my concealed perch, watching him, my finger tense on the trigger. I considered, for one moment, ending his life right then. But no, that would be too easy, and it wouldn't bring him down publicly. Plus, I wasn't a murderer. Revenge wasn't about mindless killing. It was about exposing the truth and making sure justice was served. So, instead, I let the footage speak for itself. The entire place erupted into chaos as Atlas tried to shout over the uproar, claiming it was all fake, a malicious hack, a forgery. But the truth was undeniable. We had meticulously cross-verified every file. The on-site journalists began live-streaming the revelations, flooding social media within minutes. There was no way to contain it now. Outside, sirens wailed as security forces scrambled, searching for the source of the breach. I calmly disassembled my rifle, placed it into a nondescript black case, and blended into the rush of office workers fleeing the building's perimeter in confusion. The next phase of the plan was already in motion. Drake had set up a timed release of even more incriminating documents. The revelations would keep rolling in waves, forcing the mainstream media to cover it relentlessly. Every attempt by Atlas's allies to mount a cover-up only made them look guiltier. A furious debate ignited across the nation. Calls for investigations roared in the halls of Congress, and the public demanded accountability for the betrayal of American values. Atlas did everything he could to escape the fallout. He pulled every string, tried to paint himself as a victim of a massive conspiracy, but the evidence was too damning, too detailed, and too widespread to dismiss. Whistleblowers emboldened by our revelations came out of the shadows to testify. There were confessions, hidden recordings, entire networks of corruption unraveling. Watching it all on the news from a secure location, I felt a wave of grim satisfaction. Ramirez would never come back, but his death was not in vain. Our mission had ultimately succeeded, though in a way none of us had anticipated. When the time was right, I arranged a clandestine meeting with Drake. We sat in a quiet bar near the coastline, the air smelling of salt and seaweed. The flickering neon sign outside gave the place a seedy ambience, but it was perfect for anonymity. I thanked him for everything he'd done. He shook his head, saying it was the least he could do for a friend and for the country he believed in. Outside, a news broadcast played on a small TV, showing Atlas being led away by military police. The anchor mentioned an extensive investigation, spanning multiple departments, with special prosecutors involved. It seemed justice was finally descending upon him. In the coming weeks, more arrests were made. Atlas's entire network began to collapse, revealing other conspirators within the Pentagon and various defense contractors. Some tried to flee the country, but they were intercepted at airports or on private jets. Others took plea deals, squealing on each other to save their own hides. The top brass was furious, not only at the traitors but at the fact that these crimes had gone on for so long under their noses. Public outcry demanded new legislation to keep defense officials accountable, and for once, it seemed like the system was being forced to correct itself. At first, I worried about reprisals. A cornered animal is the most dangerous, and Atlas's cronies might want to silence me. But with the government forced into a full-blown crackdown, those loyal to Atlas scattered like cockroaches under a flashlight. They had no more resources, no more safe havens, and their intimidation tactics fell apart. Journalists clamored to interview me, the mysterious whistleblower behind the scandal, but I stayed hidden. It wasn't time to reveal my identity yet. Eventually, an official statement was released by the Department of Defense, acknowledging the infiltration of corrupt elements within its ranks. They even made a veiled reference to the heroic actions of certain individuals who had exposed the wrongdoing. I found it ironic, given how they disavowed me during the mission. But the bigger victory was seeing the entire conspiracy laid bare, with tangible steps being taken to fix the damage. Yes, the system was imperfect, flawed beyond measure in some places, but this was a start. My anger began to ease, replaced by a quieter resolve to rebuild my life. Every so often, I visited Ramirez's grave. Though he died in that distant jungle, I arranged for his remains to be brought home once I'd cleared my name with a few sympathetic folks in the government. It took some backdoor negotiations, but eventually he received a proper burial, with honors that recognized his service. I stood by his headstone in the early morning light, placing a hand on the cool granite. The man was a true patriot, betrayed by those he trusted. Yet his death had ultimately sparked a chain reaction that led to the downfall of monsters wearing suits and medals they didn't deserve. My own future remained uncertain. Officially, I no longer existed in their system. My identity had been purged when I joined Black Ops, and the betrayal had cemented my status as a ghost. But that anonymity was also liberating. I could choose to fade away, live the rest of my days in quiet solitude, or I could use my skills to keep fighting the corruption that thrived in the shadows. Ultimately, I decided to do both in my own way. I created a new identity, a new life. Then, from the sidelines, I began discreetly helping others who found themselves in the crosshairs of corrupt institutions, guiding them, providing resources, ensuring they wouldn't be left to die as Ramirez had been. One day, a small parcel arrived for me at a secure drop address. Inside was a note from Drake and a flash drive. The note was brief. "They still need you. More skeletons in the closet. You in?" I stared at it for a long time, weighing my options. Part of me yearned to walk away, to finally rest. But another part, the part that had survived the jungle, that had lost everything and fought back, it refused to let the fight end. Too many skeletons still lingered. Too many powerful figures believed they could hide their crimes behind red tape and intimidation. So I tucked the flash drive into my jacket pocket, left a few bills on the bar counter, and walked out into the sunlight. I had no illusions that it would be easy. I knew every step I took would risk my life and freedom, but sometimes doing the right thing is worth any price. And now, after everything I'd endured, I didn't fear the darkness anymore. I was forged in it, surviving on rage and willpower, shaped into something far more dangerous to the corrupt than a mere operative. I was the living embodiment of their sins, the ghost of their betrayal, and if they tried to silence me again, they'd quickly realize you can't kill what you can't catch. As the investigations wrapped up, Atlas faced trial. He sat behind bulletproof glass in a high-security courtroom, expression hollow, listening to the mountain of evidence stacked against him. He looked smaller, his shoulders slumped, a far cry from the powerful puppeteer I once knew. The jury deliberated for less than a day, returning a verdict of guilty on multiple counts, from treason to conspiracy to commit murder. Spectators cheered as he was led away, though he refused to meet anyone's gaze. His final expression was one of hollow resignation, no fight left in him. He might spend the rest of his life in prison, overshadowed by the memory of the men he'd betrayed. When it was over, I watched the news coverage from a small cafe. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a familiar ache in my chest. Ramirez's face hovered in my thoughts. I could almost hear his teasing laugh, his hearty pat on my shoulder. At least, in a way, he had triumphed. We had triumphed. The wheels of justice had turned, albeit slowly, to claim the man who had betrayed us. Stepping out onto the street, I felt the sun's warmth on my face. A bright new day. The weight that had been crushing me for so long felt lighter. Though my soul would forever bear the scars of that betrayal, I found a flicker of peace in the knowledge that I had fought back, that I had won, that I had honored Ramirez and all the other good soldiers who'd never had the chance to return home. The ghosts of my past would always linger, but now they felt less like burdens and more like quiet companions reminding me why I fought in the first place. I answered Drake's summons, of course. I always will. If there's one lesson I learned from all this, it's that silence is the real enemy. When good men say nothing, evil thrives. But when even one voice cries out, revealing ugly truths with unwavering conviction, it can bring the mightiest giants to their knees. That voice was once mine, a Black Ops operative codenamed Spectre, betrayed in a mission that nearly took my life. Now, it belongs to anyone brave enough to stand against the darkness. And so, I vanish again into the shadows, unafraid, knowing that in my own way, I'm doing what I was always meant to do. Protect the ideals I hold dear, shine a light on secrets that deserve to be known, and ensure that no one, not even the Pentagon, can ever truly silence the truth. For me, that's the happiest ending possible. Carrying on Ramirez's spirit, finding a purpose larger than myself, and embracing a life unbound by fear or corruption. The betrayal no longer defines me. What defines me is the path I've chosen since. When the powerful conspire to hide their sins, I stand ready to uncover them. And if they think they can betray the very people sworn to protect our nation, they'll soon learn, as Atlas did, that some ghosts refuse to stay buried.